Hello, welcome everyone to today's webinar. We're going to look at why good, reliable, localized labour market data can be useful in course planning. This is what I plan to cover in the next 15 to 20 minutes. Here at Emsi, we have a passion for good, strong labour market data, and we're very good at doing that. More importantly, we're also very good at getting that data into the hands of the people you see on screen, who can then use the data to make better, more informed decisions. Right now, we work with more than 1,000 educational institutes right around the globe. And that varied experience helps us to understand all of the key issues that are facing vocational education in different countries. So why is this important? Well, using localized data is very much in the news right now. It's fair to say that the vocational sector itself is in the spotlight, particularly around the need for the sector to be providing skilled individuals into the workforce with those skills that employers need for jobs right now and jobs in the future. It's also fair to say that the vocational sector in Australia is in the government's eyes right now a very important issue, whether that be funding or how it's run or opening the sector up to competition. And that then feeds through to perception and reputation amongst the public. If I reflect for a second on our experience in the UK, we know there that the vocational sector has a formal inspection framework which looks into how vocational providers link their courses to labour market need. With the increased focus of the Australian government at federal and state level into vocational training in Australia, I don't think we're a million miles away from that over here too. When we think of classic economic terms like supply and demand, well, in the case of what we're talking about here, we can think of supply and demand in this way. Supply being those that leave the education system and enter the workforce, and demand being those demands coming from employers and industry. There's quite often a mismatch and sometimes a breakdown in communications between the two sides. So how do we bring supply and demand closer together? One key way to do this is for vocational providers to be more informed about growth industries, growth jobs within those industries, and to match that with employer information and employee intelligence they have on the ground. They can then start to translate that information into course development. If the courses are more fit for purpose for what employers and industry are wanting, then that makes for more successful careers for students. And when all those things work more closely together, we have employers and industry that have the right skills, learners who have the right skills that employers want, such that they can have successful careers, and economies start to flourish. So what are some of the key questions we should ask ourselves here? Well, firstly, let's think about what's going on in the labour market. Which is the labour market region that you serve? Which industries are important in your area? And how are those industries set to grow over the next few years? What jobs make up those industries? And what skills are required by employers in those industries? How do you stack up against those questions in your institution? If we then think about questions relating to your course provision, well, what does your current course portfolio look like? Do you think it matches what employers and industry want? How does it measure up against how your local labour market is changing? And how are you set up to respond to some of the growth or decline in industries and jobs? If we look at some data now on how jobs are changing in Australia and at smaller regional levels, this slide here shows the 5 fastest growing jobs in Australia between now and 2020. Just look at the 5 jobs there along the bottom. If I click to the next slide, we see the same data, but this time for a randomly selected state, the state of Queensland, the 5 fastest growing jobs to 2020 in that particular state. Again, take a look at those 5 jobs along the bottom. And if I click on again, same information, this time the 5 fastest growing jobs in a city. In this case, we've chosen Melbourne. Again, just look at those 5 jobs along the bottom. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to flick back to the state level information for Queensland and then up to the national level information. So here we are at a state level and then at a national level. State level, city level. The important thing to note here is that there isn't one single job that appears on all 3 slides. And what that shows us is that change in jobs will differ dramatically at different regional geographies. And what you need to know is what's your regional geography and how are the jobs trending in that area, rather than relying on some higher level trend that doesn't necessarily translate to the area in which you operate. If we almost take a step back now and think about the economy more as a whole, well, we really should get to grips with how industry is doing. Here are some key things to consider when it comes to industries. Firstly, we can take a look into the number of employees in a particular industry and how that compares in your region to nationally. This is data for a particular state that we chose at random in Australia, and it shows the industry sectors along the bottom, and then the blue bars highlight how many individual employers there are in each industry, and the orange dots show how concentrated those employers are in this state compared with the national average. So if we look right in the middle there, we see construction has by far and away the most individual employers in this particular state, but that the concentration of those employers is actually at 1 if we look at the orange dot, which is the national average. If we then look at those industries on the right hand side, the public sector and also information, media and telecoms, we see that they have much fewer individual employers, but that they have a much greater concentration of employers for this state than the national average. So both of those things should be important. If we now take a look at a particular sector, this time for a different state in Australia, we've chosen warehousing and storage. So we can see the important jobs down the left-hand side here for that particular sector and how those jobs are changing over the next couple of years. We can also see the different levels of education typically required for those jobs. The kind of intelligence that's crucial if you're thinking about planning courses for warehousing and storage. So if we start to bring all of this together, we've had a look there at the blue circle, labour market data, and some key things that we should be concerned about. How can we then consider your courses and the number of students on those courses and how important that is to the mix? By bringing these three things together, we get a better view of supply and demand, just like I talked about earlier on. Which courses link to which jobs and how those jobs are trending in your region. Here's an example of where we've done this analysis for a vocational provider in Australia. We see the course areas down the left-hand side, the number of completions, the number of students that completed courses in the last year, and the annual openings for jobs related to those course areas. Now you can see the numbers and information yourself, but I've just picked out one course area for three different categories. Marketing and sales suggests an undersupply coming from this provider. There are 4 completions each year, but actually there are a huge number of annual job openings in their region. Wholesale operations is an area they should consider because they don't have any students right now completing the required course in the area, but there's actually more than 1,000 annual jobs. And then sport and fitness suggests an oversupply because they are graduating more than 500 students a year, but there are only around 230 jobs in related occupations. So hopefully that's given a key quick pointer towards some really important questions and some really important things to consider. From the perspective of the labour market and the courses, what are the key questions that you should think about? Why you should use localised data, because jobs will be trending very, very differently across different geographic areas. So it's vital to look at data for your area and your institution. By taking a deeper dive into industry information can start to tell us some really important things. And why bringing all of that together is crucial to give us a much better picture of supply and demand. Just had a couple of questions come in, which I can pick up now. The first one is around how we can link courses to jobs. How do we do that? Well, Emsi have a global methodology. We've been doing this for the best part of 20 years now. And we have a very strong methodology of linking individual courses to groups of occupations. So we've done this a number of times across a number of vocational institutes globally. And it's very much our bread and butter. What we then do is we plug in your institute specific data, so how many students you have on each of your courses, which gives us that supply and demand picture that I mentioned. The other question I have here is, how can we focus on geography and how can we understand the area that we serve? Well, that's a really good question, and it depends on the area that you're interested in. So that might be where all of your students are coming from, or it might be where all of your students tend to go to get a job, or it might be an aspirational geography if you're wanting to provide training to employees in a wider geography than the one you currently serve. It's entirely up to you. The important thing from Emsi's perspective is that we have the ability to drill right down to local town, city, suburb regions in Australia to build a geography for you that really gives you that accurate service area for your particular institution. So what happens next? Well, I'd love to chat with you all about this in more detail. to understand your key challenges and to think about and discuss how we might be able to help with those. We have a vast array of experience, as I've just mentioned, and a number of different methods to get our data into your hands so that you can start to make more informed decisions. Please do reach out. You can see my contact details on the screen. You should also get them after this webinar. Please do contact me and we can have a chat about what you're dealing with right now and how we can help. So thanks for listening, and I look forward to catching up with you all soon.